I wanted to bring this up because we have spent some time on this, and I've talked about it both on First Take and the draft. I do want to talk a little bit about the Chris Paul trade one more time, just because he did his press conference yesterday, and there was I wouldn't call it salty, but there was definitely like what you mean type response to a reporter's question about him coming off the bench, and he basically said, nothing's been communicated to me. I don't know if I'm going to come off the bench or not. And I've thought a lot about, because I've talked to Chris in the last couple of weeks too, since the trade happened. And I've thought a lot about this trade and how it's all going to work and how he's going to fit. And I keep going back to like restaurants, and I keep going back to like cooking and baking every time I think about this, because like team building, like baking is more about a set ingredient level, right? You had this amount of baking soda, this amount of butter, sugar, salt, whatever, flour, all the whatever the recipe requires, you put it in, and hopefully, if your oven's working, you get the same result fairly consistently. And I don't necessarily think the NBA is like that. I think to some degree you need ingredients that complement each other, right? You need a sweet with a salty, you need all that stuff. But then I think about restaurants, and I think about what makes a great meal. And in any restaurant experience, right? In any restaurant experience, whether you're going for fine dining or you're going to an oyster shack where you're going to drink cold pilsners, there's a bunch of things that go into it, right? You talk about the front of house service, the bus people, the bartender. How does the menu look? What is the presentation of the food? And I say all this to say that a great restaurant experience is not formulaic, and a great basketball team is not formulaic. And I'm very intrigued because I think about Chris and I think about the Warriors. Steve Kerr talked about the turnover issue that they've had forever. Well, if he's playing on the ball a lot, kind of solves some of that, right? You would expect that to be better. In terms of defensive rotations, that's been an issue, especially last year. Well, he kind of solves some of that. Then you think about personality, which is so important in basketball. It's like, Steph is this daredevil and this showman and this guy that just plays with joy. And then you have Chris, who's like methodical and a tactician and is like serious on the court. Now he's not, I joke around with Chris, but he's like serious, right? And it's this like yin and yang balance thing. And you think about a great 3 or 4 course meal, and you're like, oh, that complemented that, and that complemented that. And you get to the dessert. Maybe you're not a dessert guy. Maybe there's a great wine list and you find a Chateau de Cam. I don't know. But my point is that you have all these different ingredients on a team. And maybe in some ways, like Chris Paul, I'm not saying he's the missing ingredient, but Chris Paul in some ways is something they didn't really have. And I'm really excited to see how it's all going to work.
I like the restaurant analogy a lot. It's like certain restaurants have elements of fusion.
Yeah.
It's like you bring on it's a Japanese restaurant, but you bring on a chef that has a background in whatever, some sort of Mexican fine dining or something like that, just to add little like accentures to different dishes. I think one of the things he said, if he said it directly or he was just hinting at, which, is kind of obvious, and we've said about him and those guys a million times, is like, between him, Steph, and Draymond, these are 3 of the smartest players of all time that you're putting, talent aside, just literally just the smartest players of all time that you're putting in one locker room. And he mentioned getting to Phoenix with Book. He mentioned you in LA. He's like, it's not like he goes in and plays the same way everywhere he goes. He's had different teammates. And so I think just
Harden, he had to completely for the first time in his career be like, all right, it's the 4th quarter, I'm going to go to the corner, right? It's an adjustment period. Like he's done it. Yeah.
Even the OKC thing, the year there was like that too. And so it just is like, you just have to, I think we are doing this. It's like, this is a guy who has earned, it's the benefit of the doubt is not even the right way to say it. Like, we have to understand this guy's done this his entire career.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like he's going to do it again. Now to the extent of like, does that mean they're going to win the championship? I don't know. But I feel like these guys are going to be able to figure it out.
Yeah. You know what? Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad that you said the championship, because I'll take the restaurant analogy a step further, because I was actually thinking about this even more so as it relates to expectation, right? So I'll give you an example, like Leon's in Charleston, South Carolina. If I could eat there for lunch 2 or 3 times a week, sign me up. Leon's is in an old car repair shop or garage or something like that. There's like a little back deck. There's a long bar. There's outdoor seating, like cafe seating in the front. But it's still very divey. All right. It's comfort, Charleston food, great oysters, good beer list, good cocktails. Like, it's a phenomenal place.
Yeah.
It'll never get 3 Michelin stars. No. In other words, it's not a championship level restaurant if we're thinking about it in those terms, right? If I go to French Laundry, that to me is like, all right, that we are striving for a championship. But here's the key point. I think about my own career, and I think about all the teams I was on, and I'll be damned, like, there were teams that I was like, you know what? We're Leon's. We're not going to win a championship, but this is enjoyable. I'm really, really enjoying this group and this season. I could stay here forever. With this group. And so that's what I mean. Like, it like that OKC team that is a great example of that. That was a Leon's, right? The Houston Rockets, they were trying to be French Laundry, right? Yeah. They were trying to be a championship team.
But I'll give you to add to the restaurant analogy. So what makes them obviously so interesting is maybe they'll be Leon's, but they have I wasn't even talking about specifically the Warriors. I'm just saying, like,
it could be a great team to watch, whether they win the championship or not. It could work. But I don't know if they're going to win the championship.
But I just think what makes it cool is just their upside is still so high. I mean, this team that won the championship 2 years ago, like I was thinking about with the food analogy, it's like our friend Billy Durney, who's a, smoke master extraordinaire, whatever. It's like the guy makes the best burger in America. Red Oak Tavern in Brooklyn's the best burger in America. And you're like, when you have the upside of like, okay, this place maybe it's not a Michelin restaurant. It doesn't look from the outside like it's going to work necessarily, but like the skill set is there and the talent is there. Like, that's the thing with this team is like these guys, if they would you be stunned if they won, 60 games next year? Like, they still have an insane amount of talent on the roster, whether or not like,
I would say this. I don't know how much the new end of season award guidelines in terms of games played are going to affect how much star players play, because the reality is there's still guys that get injured. The reality with the Warriors is that they're 4 guys, they're all older. They've all been injured. And so you have to be, I don't like 60 games. That would surprise me, just because I don't know that like those guys are going to play 65 games together.
Yeah,
right?
They care enough about that.
Yeah. Well, I think more about just like the playoffs. It's not to say the regular season doesn't matter. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like the objective for the Warriors next year is not to win 60 games, right? They're not an up and coming team. Their objective is to figure out how they're going to make this work, play good basketball, whatever comes of that in the regular season. Hopefully they're healthy, knock on wood. Then you get to the playoffs and you're like, all right, we have our formula, our own formula for what makes a great meal at this restaurant. And let's go see if we can get 3 Michelin stars, right? Yeah. That's what's intriguing. And we should also mention you should mention Kuminga. Like, does he figure something out? Is he going to, team up with Chris? Does he play more like ghost screen action slip with Chris to try to get behind the defense and make plays back there? Is Moody going to benefit? Right? That all is important too.
That's what I'm most interested in, is how he's going to unlock those guys, because we talked about it a bunch on the show last year, just like how dominant they were, how dominant the starting 5 was, and really how Steph was at various points, and then how they would fall off a cliff. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, some of which we know, some of which we don't know. But that if he can figure out a way to like help those guys grow a little bit, they don't have to be all stars. But if they can get something out of those young guys, I'm like, that still is not a team you want to run into in the playoffs.
For sure.